Hello and welcome. This is Mouse Gunner, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different in this video with automation. I was contacted by a fellow YouTuber, the Tom Gaming channel, and he had the proposition of uh, co-reviewing each other's vehicles. So I sent him a vehicle that I kind of slapped together, and he sent me a vehicle of his own, and I'm going to go ahead and do a review of the car he sent me. And if you want to see his review of the car I sent him, you can go ahead and check out his channel. I'll put a link to his channel in the description so you can check that out. So what he's trying to go for with this car build, this is obviously a modern car built in this year, 2015, modern times. And what he's trying to go for is either a Range Rover Sport or the Porsche Cayenne Turbo S kind of car. So those are the two competitors he's going for. So your luxury, high-end, high-performance off-roader. And styling-wise, I think he achieves that look very well. If I was a footballer / soccer player, I'd be tripping over myself to get one of these, as this kind of car is popular, at least stereotypically, with that crowd. And I think you get that right amount of bling with this kind of vehicle. And I'm seeing very much a similarity to the styling of your Range Rover or Land Rover style vehicle. So I think he gets the styling perfectly. I'm going to go ahead and do a 360 view so you can see it. Now, he is using some mods here that I had to install. I typically don't use mods when I play automation, so I had to install them specifically for this video. But again, I think he captures that styling pretty well by using those different mods. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the chassis. So we have a monocoque chassis with made out of aluminum, and I think that's what you come to expect out of vehicles of this age. As a matter of fact, I think it was Range Rover / Land Rover that kind of was one of the first ones to do this with this type of vehicle. With your larger SUV, is having that aluminum chassis to try and keep that weight a little bit lower. Obviously, it's going to cost more, but in the end, that weight saving is going to help you with a lot of your performance issues. We have a front longitudinal setup with a McPherson strut in the front, and I think he's going with the maximum off-road potential here, so you get a little bit less off-road ability with double wishbone. And then you have your multi-link suspension. Now, this isn't going to get the same kind of off-road ability that you're going to get with your solid axle, whether leaf or coil, which coil is the best. It's not going to be quite that good off-road ability, but you don't have all the penalties you would have with a solid axle with multi-link. And I think this is what you would come to expect from a modern vehicle of this type, especially in the luxury end. This is going to cost more and take a lot, more production units, as you see here. But the benefits and drivability, your on-road performance is well worth it. And we also have aluminum panel material, again, keeping that cost low. All right, we already looked at the styling, so let's jump ahead to how he has the engine mounted and what type of drive type we have, which is longitudinal all-wheel drive. We already knew it was longitudinal, and all-wheel drive just makes perfect sense for this type of vehicle. He's going for maximum off-road ability, I'm assuming, by the way he has set everything up. So let's go ahead and jump into the engine, take a look at that. Now, this is a pretty big V8, 6 liters. Looks like it's twin turbocharged. And I went ahead and did a little bit of homework and jotted down some notes about what you would expect from the competition. The Range Rover Sport SVR has a supercharged 5-liter engine, so again, displacement pretty much on, a larger on the engine we have here. And we'll talk about the horsepower numbers here in a little bit, but also we have the Cayenne Turbo S, which has a 4.8-liter turbocharged engine. So again, displacement larger here. We have a aluminum block as well as head, dual overhead cam with 5 valves per cylinder, trying to get that peak efficiency out of this engine. Moving along, we have the crank conrods and pistons. We have forged steel, I-beam titanium, and forged. And I'm going to assume that's a lot of that's to do with dealing with the how much power you have coming out of here, especially the torque. That's pretty high there. And, the revs that this engine's cranking out. Usually larger displacement engines are going to have a little bit more durability concerns as far as this category here, crank conrods and pistons. But let's talk about the competition here. So that 5-liter supercharged engine in the Range Rover Sport SVR is producing 550 horsepower and 502 foot-pounds of torque. So this definitely beats that by a good margin, 575 and 674 foot-pounds of torque. Just tons of torque out of this engine. And then the Cayenne Turbo S comes in with 570 horsepower and 590 foot-pounds of torque. So again, this is very torquey engine comparatively. And moving along, we have the compression comes in at 9.1. Now this is a little bit low compared to the Cayenne Turbo S, which I think was the only engine out of these two that actually listed what the compression was, which was 10.5. But considering, and I've stated this in the past, that it's usually not in your best interest to match the compression ratio numbers of real life engines. Just the way the game mechanics work, you usually are better off with having a little bit less compression ratio, and that's one thing that I've kind of voiced in the past. With the cam profile, we go a little bit towards the sporty end of a cam profile, but nothing really outrageous. Again, I'm going to probably assume if you went too crazy with this, first off, he has plenty of power, so I don't think he needs any more, but also you're going to start having the revs get higher and higher, and you're going to have to contend with that durability-wise. We have variable valve timing on all cams, which is going to, again, increase the efficiency of this engine. Obviously, it's going to cost more to do so, but considering this is a luxury, high-end, high-output engine, I think you can do with that cost. Now the turbocharger here, twin turbo, of course, with the V8, and I'm going to assume whenever they implemented this with V6s, you only have the choice of twin turbo. Eventually, I would hope that they have the option for a single turbo if you so choose. And now, I'm not an expert on the turbochargers, so I couldn't really speak too much on how he has his turbocharger set up. I have very limited experience working with turbochargers in this game, and I have very little knowledge of this in real life. I have very basic knowledge of it. But in any case, he has a water-to-air huge intercooler, and again, that's going to help with the cooling, obviously intercooler, of the engine. Usually speaking, reducing heat is very good for performance, so that's why this setup, I'm assuming, was chosen. And again, I'm not going to speak too much on the settings because I'm no expert in this category, but you can go ahead and check it out yourself. Let's go ahead and look at his fuel systems here. So we have direct injection with a single standard intake. Okay. So not really going with the more high performance like throttle per cylinder style, just a single throttle. But, again, he's getting plenty of power out of this. So not really maybe necessary, and I'm not seeing any issue here with his fuel system. It looks green, so that looks fine. And again, standard intake, more than likely this type of vehicle would have a standard intake. So usually speaking, when you're talking about performance intakes, you're talking about somebody doing an aftermarket, parts swap, not what would come out of the factory. Usually most factory cars are going to come with a standard intake. There's exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, you're going to have a standard intake. Went with premium fuel. Now, you could have gone either way with this. Obviously, regular fuel would be out of the question with this type of engine, but I think you could probably have gone with super in this instance. But again, that's up to your own design here. So there's nothing wrong with going with premium. Now, the fuel mixture is kind of middle of the road, 13.5. If you watch a lot of my videos, this is one of those things that I think you're better off with just putting it as lean as it can go. And again, I know that's not very realistic, but that's kind of the gamesmanship of the way that the engine designer works is, for instance, he's overpowered, in my opinion, with what he has engine-wise. Now, displacement-wise, this is probably appropriate. But he's outperforming all the engines that he's facing. So I might even go down with the fuel mixture to try and make up the economy and maybe go aggressive with other settings. And again, maybe switch up to the super to make up for the fact that you're leaning out the fuel mixture. But again, that's my own kind of feeling for how to build engines. And, I don't see anything wrong with the way he did this. This is more realistic setup for sure. Ignition timing is very aggressive, but usually ignition timing is going to be one of your more efficient ways to gain power and everything. For instance, he could have brought down the ignition timing and brought up the compression ratio to a more, comparable, or at least comparable to real life number. But his actual performance, both as far as horsepower and torque, as well as economy, would have suffered for it. And you're better off setting up the engine the way he did. RPM limit seems to be all right. We can even play with this a little bit. It looks like he made a little bit of a compromise here for probably reliability, as the peak performance index is much further out, as this is a pretty flat curve right here. But he had it at 6,800, and we'll put it back on that. So you do see that cut off a little bit of the performance index, but in exchange for the reliability. And my usual standard rule of thumb is about 400 RPM above where your power is coming in, and he's definitely getting more than that, so there's nothing wrong with the way he's setting things up. Obviously, there's exceptions to that rule of thumb, but you can't usually go wrong by that. Okay, so as far as the exhaust, your headers are always going to be set to short cast whenever you're using a turbocharger. This is one of those things that I'm not so sure I agree with. We have dual exhausts, no bypass, and you went with a high flow three-way, probably peak performance there, and then straight through mufflers. And I think he's keeping the loudness reasonably low, but enough so that you're going to hear, the power. This is a high power or high performance car, so you want to hear a little bit of noise, but it's keeping it a little bit on the lower end so that you're not inhibiting the luxury end of this vehicle. Because with luxury vehicles, you obviously want to keep the interior cabin quiet. Okay, I am noticing a little bit of colors here with the exhaust, and just to show, if he had made the exhaust diameter a little bit wider, it would have given him a little bit more power as far as the horsepower, and than he's getting currently. But we'll put it back to where he had it. So in this instance, I probably would have upped that exhaust diameter, and then the power that you get out of this, I would have balanced by bringing down the fuel mixture. But again, that's just my personal feeling of this. And we already talked about the numbers we're getting, so let's go ahead and jump into the trim here. Okay, so first off, I'm going to kind of go through this and see what he has, and then I'm going to discuss some things maybe that I would have done differently. But again, there's nothing wrong with the way he set up his vehicle. So first off, we have our drivability number coming in at 48.1. Sportiness comes in at 32.2. Comfort at 64.3. Definitely pretty good there. Prestige comes in at 51.6. And safety at 79.5. Good there as well. But I think a lot of that has to do with some of the choices he made later. Now, miles per gallon is 12.8 miles per gallon, and I did write down the comparisons here, and we'll talk about that in a second. We have 0 to 62 in 3.8 seconds, pretty good. Wheel spin, we're coming in with 24, 25-ish%, 24.5, we'll say. And we have our material costs and our production units. Now, I can't really translate the material costs into real-life money because no car of this type is going to cost $24,000. There's just no way. And production units is going to technically cost you money probably, so there's that as well. So let's talk about our comparison as far as the miles per gallon and the 0 to 62 time. So with your Range Rover Sport, which unfortunately the Porsche Cayenne did not, the Turbo S did not have the economy numbers. It's a to be declared. So they haven't announced those yet, so I apologize for that. But in any case, your Range Rover Sport with that 5-liter supercharged engine is getting at 4.5 seconds for 0 to 62, so this outperforms that for sure. And the top speed comes in at 162 miles an hour. We'll see that later when we look at the test track. Now, I wrote down the combined miles per gallon is 15. Now, of course, this is the U.S. market, so keep that in mind. And the highway is 19. Now, I assume, although I don't think this is explicitly stated, that this is the combined miles per gallon. So you can see the Range Rover is definitely getting, I would say, a decently better fuel economy than the car we have here. And that might be where, the engine design might have a part to play in that. And there's some other suggestions I have as well. Now, the Turbo S, the Cayenne Turbo S, has the 0 to 62 time of 3.8 seconds, so exactly the same as what he has here, and 176 miles per hour top speed. So, and that's as per advertised by the manufacturers, so keep that in mind as well. All right, so that all being said, let's go ahead and look at what we've got. So we've got a sequential double clutch gearbox, with 8 speeds. The Range Rover also had an 8-speed gearbox. I don't know what type. I don't think it's specified for what, just basic specifications I looked at. And I also don't know what the Porsche Cayenne had, but I think this is probably pretty similar to what they have, or at least what you might expect from this type of vehicle. Now, the top speed comes in at 156 miles an hour. Spacing comes in at 25. We have an electric LSD, and that is going to, again, be for nice off-road ability, but it's also going to help with drivability, sportiness, and all these other stats as well. And I think you would expect this with this type of vehicle for sure. We have 50-50 power distribution. Tire choice comes in with a chunky off-road, and you have your setup here, so 245s in the front, 245s in the rear with 19-inch rims. And we have alloy rim material as well. And the brakes are vented discs in front and rear with 6-piston in the front and 4-piston in the rear. Brake size comes in at 350 in the front and 310 in the rear. Cooling airflow, we've got an off-road skid tray, which again makes sense for what this vehicle is trying to do. The cooling airflow comes in at 480 and required was only at 340. As far as the interior setup, we have 5 seats, which I think is pretty standard for instance, that Range Rover Sport, and I think what you would probably expect out of a Porsche Cayenne Turbo as well. So I think this is going along with the other models in this kind of bracket. We have a luxury interior, again going along the lines of that high-end luxury vehicle, luxury infotainment. And we've got the gamut of all the driver assist, power steering, anti-lock brake system, traction control, electronic stability, and launch control. Now, I think most of these are should be in this. You could make an argument for launch control, but I don't really remember if the Range Rover Sport or the Porsche Cayenne Turbo S would have launch control, but I don't see a reason why you wouldn't have it. I mean, that's one thing. Out of all of these, I could see you could do away with the launch control, but all the other ones are make perfect sense. And we have advanced safety, which we kind of expected from the high the safety numbers are. Okay, so for the suspension, we have active comfort and semi-active dampers. And again, I think this is, exactly what you would expect with this type of vehicle from this time period. And I'm not exactly sure the suspension setup, if it's appropriate or not. That's one of those things you kind of have to play around with. But one thing I do notice is that we do have a little bit of bottom out, even though we have quite a high ride height. So that seems like I usually try and get rid of bottom out as much as possible. And with an off-road vehicle to have bottom out seems like something is a little bit up. And also you have the bump graph is very jagged here. So I'm kind of wondering if there's something up with the suspension setup, but maybe we'll look at that a little bit later. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at things, and I'm going to do what I would do with my car builds and just go over the detailed stats, but I'm just going to kind of go through it, and if you want to look at anything in detail, just go ahead and pause. So we'll do detailed stats. So we have drivability, we have sportiness, we have comfort, we have prestige, and finally we have safety. Okay, so looking at our test track, we already discussed what the top speeds of the competitive vehicles were, but I'll just restate them here. So the Range Rover Sport SVR is getting 162 miles an hour, and your Porsche Cayenne Turbo S is getting 176 miles an hour. So we're short of that here by, I would say, you're only 6 miles an hour shorter than the Range Rover Sport SVR, but you're, I would say, a pretty good margin away from what the Porsche Cayenne Turbo S is getting. 0 to 62 time, we already discussed, is competitive with the Porsche Cayenne Turbo S. And let's go ahead and just do a track time here. And you have to keep in mind that that although this is a kind of high performance vehicle, it is not specifically made chiefly to go around a track. So we get a time of 1 minute 31.76, which I say is fairly good for what the type of vehicle it is. So let's go ahead, and what I'm going to do here at this point is I'm going to clone this this trim and hop into the clone. And I'm going to do a little bit of tweaks here and there and kind of demonstrate some things that maybe I would have done a little bit differently. So if we jump into the trim, the first thing that I would do differently is the setup of the gearbox. I don't really feel like, and let's go ahead and load this in so we get our graphs behaving appropriately. Now, me personally, with this all-wheel drive layout, I know there's a lot of power going through this engine, but I think you can get away with getting this wheel spin completely down. One of your chief enemies to your drivability stat is going to be wheel spin and brake fade. Those are very massive penalties, and they will result in pretty big penalties to these stats. So I would do some tweaks here with the top speed, not only to improve the fuel economy of this engine, but also to get rid of that wheel spin. So let's just play around with this a little bit, and you're starting to see right away the, well, we did have a slight improvement there in miles per gallon. Now it's just going downhill. It should start improving eventually. But usually speaking, with this kind of gearbox, where you have like an 8-speed gearbox, your later gears are not going to be acceleration gears. They're mostly there for that fuel economy. They're there to be cruising gears once you get up to highway speeds, you know, for the most part. So it looks like, and it's kind of hard to tell with how many gears we have 7 and 8 being past our top speed, you know, much, well, beyond that, giving us, so far we've been hurting our 0 to 62 time, but I'll address that later. But you notice how our miles per gallon has improved. I think it was what, at 12.8, something like that, before. And now we've gotten it all the way up to 13.9. So we're starting to get closer to that 15 miles per gallon that the Range Rover was getting. And we're still doing better 0 to 62 time than the Range Rover. Obviously, the Range Rover doesn't have the power we have, so that's one thing to consider. Also, notice how the wheel spin has gone down. But we're going to probably gain that wheel spin back when I tweak some things here. Now, we could go more at the top speed, but just to show off kind of some of the things that we're going to be benefiting from here. Notice that our total top speed is starting to go up to 159.2. I don't know if it's ever going to be better than that. But another thing that we could do is we have so much more cooling airflow than we really need. So let's bring that down. And I'll put it like about there. So this hurt some of our stats initially, but it should help our top speed here. You notice how it's up there. Now we're actually equaling the top speed that the Range Rover Sport SVR was doing. So if we were to compete specifically with the Range Rover Sport SVR, we're already pretty much beating it. We've got 162 miles an hour, and we've got 4.1 acceleration. But we're not beating that that Cayenne Turbo S, so we have to consider that. So he has his spacing set up, you know, much tamer to kind of deal with the fact that he had such a low top speed setup. Now, we could keep going aggressive with this, honestly, if we wanted to. I would probably stop at about here. So we're getting almost 14 miles per gallon, and we've definitely reduced our wheel spin. But unfortunately, our drivability is not doing as well as I would have hoped. But we can start addressing the top speed now, and we're probably going to get it back to the 3.8 and maybe have even less wheel spin. So that's what we're going for. And of course, we're getting back a lot of that wheel spin, but eventually we'll get it back to 3.8, which we do. Now, we've lost a little bit in drivability, which is actually something I didn't expect to see because we actually reduced the wheel spin number. I would have expected this to actually be an increase in drivability. But that's just something I would have done to kind of tweak things around a little bit. Now, obviously, we made our miles per gallon a little bit worse by doing some of these tweaks, but uh, I think we benefited in the vein that we reduced wheel spin, which is again a penalty to us, and we also increased our top speed. Now, one thing that I'm going to assume here, and I'm going to have to see that later, is maybe we made brake fade worse. We did. That's where our drivability went, and that's what I'm talking about. Brake fade is a pretty big penalty, and this is another area where I'd change things, but I'm not going to do that quite yet. Okay, so that's some of the changes I would have made. Getting that gearbox out, I might have even done more with the top speed to get that fuel economy a little bit better. And as you're doing that, you're going to be reducing the wheel spin. So that's kind of the goal we have there. Now, the other thing I would change is I don't think chunky off-road tires is really appropriate. And I understand he was trying to go for maximizing off-road, but if you really think about it, both the Range Rover Sport SVR and the Porsche Cayenne Turbo S are more than likely not coming with chunky off-road tires. That's one of those things you could slap on if you intended to go off-road. But as these cars, yes, they have the ability to go off-road, but more than likely are going to be used by people that will never take them off-road, your footballers and soccer players. I think you would probably either want to go with medium compound road or sports compound road. Now, personally, considering how this is a more performance-oriented car, I would go with sports compound road. And you notice, as a result of that, we lose a little bit in comfort. But we gain in drivability, we gain in sportiness, and we gain a little tad in prestige. And now, again, if you look at the graph, though, as well, that also affects our steering behavior quite a bit. And I think that would be an appropriate change for what you have here. And this is also going to deal with our wheel spin, which is the main reason our drivability went up as high as it did. So that's one change I would make with the tire setup. I'm not going to mess around with his other settings because they're probably just fine. But let's move along. Now, the brakes. This is pretty simple, actually. You could either make the pad type more aggressively or just make the brakes bigger. I mean, you have 19-inch rims. There's no reason why you wouldn't. So I would bring these up. And it looks like about 370 is the best you're going to get out of... Or, yeah, 365 is the best you're going to get out of the front. And we can pretty much get rid of this brake fade entirely. There you go. So 365's in the front, 320's in the rear. And notice how much higher our drivability is just by doing that. As I said, wheel spin and brake fade are your biggest enemies. So if you can deal with the wheel spin and you can deal with the brake fade, you're going to really be better off in a lot of these categories as far as drivability and sportiness. So... those are a couple of changes I would make personally. And let's go ahead and look at our final results here. So we also brought our miles per gallon back up to 13.9. Now, suspension I'm not going to play around with because that's usually one of the more time-consuming elements of setting up a suspension. Setting up suspension is one of the more time-consuming elements of building a car, especially in this game. But I kind of wonder if this could be a little bit better as well. When I see this much movement in the bump graph, I'm not so sure if that's a good thing or not. But again, I would have to play with this quite a bit to see. But definitely the bottom out is going to be a pretty big penalty too. So let's try and get rid of that without changing any of his other setup. But obviously, we're losing a little bit in sportiness, but by getting rid of the bottom out, you'll notice the difference. So let's go back to where it was. So we had a bottom out of right there. That was where he had it before. So we did gain a little bit. So, you could argue that what you're gaining in drivability, you're losing in sportiness. I'll leave it the suspension as it is. But I think the main reason why this front wheel is bouncing so much is the suspension is very soft in the front here. Both spring stiffness and damper stiffness. And as you see, if I were to increase the damper stiffness, look at my stats. They're immediately going up. And the bottom out will go away too as you start to mess with the damper stiffness here. So again, that's just my feeling on things, but I'm going to put it back the way it was. And also, you're improving the roll angle, which is going to improve your handling. which is going to allow you to get around the track a little bit faster. So definitely, I think this front suspension is just a little bit too soft, and I'm not really sure. Maybe off-road ability is being hurt by this. Doesn't appear to be. So that's one thing that I would have changed right away, is definitely stiffening up this front suspension. As you can see, not only is it improving our stats, but it's also improving the body bump graph dramatically. So let's just bring this back to where it was and go on from there. Okay, so I think that pretty much, wraps everything up. Let's go ahead and look at our test track just real quick here. So we were able to get the top speed up to 162.7 miles an hour. And obviously, we might be able to get it up even higher than that, but we're at least competitive with the Range Rover Sport SVR. We're a little bit behind the Porsche Cayenne Turbo S, but I think with some tweaks here and there, we'd probably be able to improve that. Our acceleration time is actually better than the other two cars, but when you consider that our engine has more power, that's actually what you want to see. And then our cornering is a little bit better, I think, as well. So let's go ahead and do our time here. And this should give us a direct comparison to when I ran it last time. So you notice right away, we cut off more than 4 seconds of time with our test track. So, just a little bit of tweaks here and there, I think can be done. But otherwise, very well done construction. And again, as well as the engine, I would do a little bit of changes to that as well. And the end result that you would have is a better fuel economy than what we got here. I think you could probably get that pretty close to that 15 miles a gallon that I was talking about with the Range Rover Sport SVR. So in any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Mouse Gunner signing out.